Hi guys, I keep asking, what does Donald Trump hope to achieve by punishing both friend and foe with tariffs? The latest round of economic sanctions will likely destroy the world economy. Trump is upping the tariffs on China to over 100%. To give you an idea of how bad this would be, if an iPhone currently costs about $1,000, it would go up to $2,200 overnight. Here Trump sycophant Stephen Miller explains to Republican-friendly Fox News that China will be forced to come to the table, but to do what exactly?
I believe that China will be forced very soon to come to the table for the simple reason that China's economy is completely dependent on its exports to the United States and to the West.
Okay, it's not completely dependent on exports to the United States and the West. And notice that he included the West here. But the West is not imposing economic sanctions on China at the moment. It's just the United States. And what I'm talking about here is, according to this graph that was produced based on data from 2023, you can see here exports from China to the United States worth $96 billion. To the rest of the world, excluding the US, was $339 billion. So not most of it is going to the United States and the West. Yes, probably a significant amount going to the West, but the West has not imposed economic sanctions on China. The US has. You can see here most of the exports are consumer electronics, which I'll get to in just a moment.
China has built its entire industrial strategy since its entrance into the World Trade Organization on being able to sell highly subsidized, currency-manipulated, dumped goods into U.S. markets. It is an industrial strategy from China to product dump strategically to take out American steel, to take out American aluminum, to take out core American defense industries and defense needs so that we're reliant on China. And what's happening here is that China is now discovering for the first time that they have met an American president who is not going to be intimidated, who's not going to be bullied, who's not going to be coerced, who's going to stand up for our essential security needs.
Okay, so what does Donald Trump hope to achieve with these tariffs? Is it to bring manufacturing back to the United States? As I mentioned earlier about electronics, there are companies like Foxconn in China which have factories the size of small cities. Is Donald Trump planning to do that in the United States? See, the idea of the iPhone costing $1,000, it costs $1,000 because Apple have been able to benefit from massive manufacturing in China and very sophisticated supply chains. Now, what Donald Trump is doing is he's going to put this massive tariff on China, expecting, well, what's going to happen is Apple or other manufacturers are just going to move to the US. But that's not going to be the case. It would be cheaper to just pay the tariff or to absorb the tariff or pass on the tariff than to actually insource the manufacturing in the US, to bring that manufacturing back. Because once again, as I said, you need to rebuild. You have to build factories, not rebuild them because they don't exist. You have to rebuild the supply chains, and that's really expensive. It's difficult to get data on this, but it's suggested that an iPhone could cost over $10,000 if it were to be produced in the United States. Now, who's going to buy those phones? This would destroy Apple as a company. It would be cheaper for them just to continue to sell from China, produce in China, and import them from China and pay the tariff than to actually produce it in the United States. And I keep coming back to this point, even if you were to do that and absorb all those costs and almost bankrupt the company or basically bankrupt it, there's no guarantee that Donald Trump wouldn't remove the tariffs the very next day. There's no incentive for American companies to move their manufacturing away from China and to the United States. So when Stephen Miller says what we need to do is bring China to the table, but to negotiate what? What do you want China to do? You may say, well, we want to force them to stop subsidizing their companies. But what China will say is, well, what we'll do is we'll trade with other parts of the world. We'll take the hit It's going to be a hit in the short and medium term, but it's in our interest in the long term to protect our industries. So I don't see how this is going to work. This is not going to convince China to come to the negotiating table and give away destroy its own interests, give away its advantage. And it's not going to convince China to continue to export to the US. China is going to see, here is a belligerent partner or customer. Well, it makes more sense for us to take a short-term hit and then focus on other markets. Because remember, Donald Trump is not going to be around forever. It makes more economic sense for China to sit this one out and wait for the United States to put somebody in charge who actually understands global trade, who understands that imposing economic sanctions on yourself is a bad idea. There may be negotiations, but China is not going to give away its advantages, and it's certainly not going to do whatever Donald Trump dictates.